You are nothing. You have always been nothing, and I will not have you embarrassing this family in front of the Alpha King." The words came from her father's mouth, but Alara had heard variations of them her entire life. 23 years of being the daughter without a wolf, the stain on a noble bloodline, the living reminder that even the strongest alpha families could produce a defect. She stood in the grand hall of the royal palace, her worn servant's dress a stark contrast to the silk and jewels that adorned every other member of her family. Her father, Alpha Marcus of the Silvercrest Pack, looked at her with the same expression he always wore when forced to acknowledge her existence. Disgust mixed with disappointment, seasoned with a hint of shame. Her stepmother, Luna Catherine, smiled. That smile was worse than her father's contempt, because it held satisfaction. The pleasure of a woman who had spent 2 decades ensuring that her own daughter would shine while the unwanted child from the first mate withered in shadow, and Vivian, beautiful, perfect Vivian stood beside their father in a gown of midnight blue that matched her eyes, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of copper and gold. She did not even look at Alara. That was Vivian's particular cruelty. Not hatred, but complete and utter indifference, as if Alara existed in a dimension slightly removed from the one that mattered. The Alpha King arrives tomorrow for the wedding. "Festivities," her father continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that made every wolf in the room except Alara feel the weight of his authority. "A week of celebrations, hunts, ceremonies, and balls. Every noble family in the kingdom will be here. I will not have you skulking around the palace, reminding everyone that Silvercrest blood can run weak." Alara kept her eyes downcast, her hands clasped in front of her. She had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. That trying to defend herself was like trying to hold water in a sieve. The liquid of her dignity just slipped through her fingers no matter how tightly she grasped. "Father, surely she could remain in the servants' quarters," Vivian said, her voice carrying that musical quality that made men stupid and women envious. "No one would need to know she is family." It was almost kind, the way Vivian said it. Almost. If you did not know that Vivian's kindness was a blade wrapped in silk, designed to cut deeper because you never saw it coming until you were already bleeding. "The servants talk," Luna Catherine interjected smoothly, "and rumors spread, especially with so many visiting packs. Someone will recognize her. Someone will remember that Marcus had a first mate, that there was a daughter before Vivian." She paused, letting the weight of that possibility settle over the room like a suffocating blanket. "Someone will ask questions about why the Alpha's eldest daughter is not being presented at her sister's wedding." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken options, each one worse than the last. Alara's heart began to pound in her chest, a rhythm of dread that had no wolf to amplify it, no supernatural strength to steady it. She was just human fear wrapped in human flesh, and she suddenly understood that whatever they had planned, it was not going to be merciful. "The stables," her father finally said, and the words dropped into the room like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through even the hardened guards who stood at the doors. "The royal stables. We will tell the staff she has been assigned to prepare them for the king's beasts. She will remain there for the duration of the celebrations. No one will question a servant working in the stables, and no noble will venture there. By the time the week is over and the wedding is complete, we will send her away to one of the border packs, some remote place where she can live out her days." In obscurity. Alara's head snapped up, her carefully maintained composure cracking like thin ice over a frozen lake. "The royal stables. Father, those are not just stables. They house the battle beasts, the creatures the king brings to war. Even the trainers do not go in alone after dark." Her voice was shaking, and she hated herself for it. Hated that even now, even after everything, she still hoped some part of her father might care enough to reconsider. Alpha Marcus's eyes, the same green as her own, met hers for the first time in months. Then I suggest you do not give them a reason to attack you. Stay quiet, stay still, survive the week, and you can have a life away from here. Cause trouble, and I will tell the guards to lock the doors and lose the key. It was not a metaphor. It was not hyperbole. It was a threat delivered with the casual certainty of a man who had already decided that one daughter's life was worth less than another daughter's happiness. Vivian's wedding tow. Alpha King Theron was a political alliance that would elevate the Silvercrest Pack to unprecedented power. Ilara's existence was a footnote that needed to be erased from the narrative. Two guards stepped forward, men Ilara had known her entire life, men who had once smiled at her when she was a child, before it became clear she would never shift, never be one of them. Their faces were carefully neutral now, professional masks that revealed nothing of what they thought about escorting an Alpha's daughter to what amounted to a death sentence. "Take her now," Luna Catherine said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "I want her gone before the king's advance party arrives. And make sure she understands. If she makes a sound, if she causes any disruption, if anyone discovers where she is, the consequences will be severe." The guard's hands on her arms were not rough, but they were firm. Ilara did not resist. There was no point. She had no wolf to help her fight, no supernatural strength to break free, no pack to defend her. She was alone in the way that only the wolfless daughter of an Alpha could be alone, surrounded by people who were connected by bonds she could never feel, part of a world that had deemed her unworthy of entry. They led her through the palace corridors, away from the grand halls being prepared for celebration, away from the music and laughter that would soon fill these spaces, down into the lower levels where the air grew cooler and the stone walls older. The royal stables were not like normal stables. They had been built centuries ago, before the current palace, carved partially into the mountain itself with reinforced walls of stone and iron. They were designed to hold creatures that could tear through wood like paper, beasts whose power rivaled that of the strongest Alphas. Ilara had only seen them from a distance, heard the roars and howls that occasionally echoed across the palace grounds, seen the massive shapes moving in the shadows beyond the iron bars. The head trainer, a grizzled man named Garrett with scars covering half his face and one eye that had gone milky white from some long-ago battle, stood at the entrance. He took one look at Ilara, then at the guards, and his expression darkened. "You cannot be serious. You are leaving a human girl in the beast stables? For a week?" His voice was rough as gravel, and there was something in it that might have been protest, might have been the last gasp of conscience from a man who had seen too much cruelty to be surprised by it anymore, but not quite enough to be numb. "Alpha's orders," one of the guards said, and those two words carried the weight of absolute authority in a pack society. Alpha's orders were law. They were gravity. They were the force that held the pack together and made questioning impossible. Garrett stared at the guard for a long moment, then turned his gaze to Ilara. She saw something flicker in his good eye, something that might have been pity, or might have been respect for the fact that she was not crying, not begging, not falling apart even though they all knew what this meant. "There is a small room in the back, where we store feed and equipment. It has a cot. I will leave water and food outside the door each day." He paused, then added in a lower voice meant only for her, "Stay in that room at night. Do not, under any circumstances, approach the cages after dark. The beast can smell fear, and they can sense weakness. If you stay still and quiet, you might survive this." It was the closest thing to kindness anyone had offered her, this practical advice on how to maybe not die. Ilara nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. The guards released her arms, and she walked forward into the stable without being pushed, preserving that last small shred of dignity by entering her prison under her own power. The smell hit her first. Animal musk, mixed with hay and something else. Something wilder and more primal that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up even though she had no wolf to respond to the danger. The stable was dim, despite the afternoon sun outside, the thick stone walls and small windows allowing only slivers of light to penetrate the shadows. As her eyes adjusted, she began to make out the enclosures. They were not stalls. They were cages, massive structures of iron and reinforced wood, each one large enough to hold several horses, but designed for single occupants. And in those cages, shapes moved. She saw the outline of something massive and lupine, far larger than any natural wolf, with eyes that glowed amber in the darkness. In another cage, a creature with the fluid grace of a great cat, but the size of a small house, paced back and forth, its shadow-black fur seeming to absorb what little light reached it. There were others, shapes she could not quite make out, accompanied by sounds that ranged from low growls to keening whines that were almost like songs. These were the Alpha King's battle. Beasts, creatures he had collected from across the kingdom and beyond. Animals that had been touched by the same ancient magic that gave werewolves their power, but had never been human to begin with. They were weapons, kept here during peacetime, but always ready for war. Garrett led her to the back of the stable, past cage after cage of restless, watching beasts. She could feel their eyes on her, could sense their attention in a way that was purely instinctual, the prey's awareness of being observed by predators. The room he showed her was exactly as he had described. Small, windowless, with stone walls and a heavy wooden door that could be barred from the inside. There was a narrow cot with a thin blanket, a bucket in the corner that she did not want to think too hard about, and a small shelf that held nothing. "I will bring food at dawn and dusk," Garrett said. "I cannot do more without drawing attention. The other trainers do not come here during the festival week. They will be attending the celebrations or given leave. You will be alone. Alone with the beasts." He did not say it, but it hung in the air between them. Alara turned to face him, and for the first time since this nightmare had begun, she let herself ask the question that mattered. "Do you think I will survive?" Garrett's scarred face was unreadable. "I have seen these beasts kill trained warriors in seconds. I have seen them tear through steel, but I have also seen them spare creatures they deemed unthreatening. If you truly have no wolf, if you are as human as you seem, they might ignore you. You are not a challenge. You are not food. You are just there. Stay small, stay quiet, and you might be invisible enough to survive." It was not hope exactly, but it was not certain death either. It was the thin line between the two, and Alara decided she would walk it. She nodded once, and Garrett left, the sound of his footsteps fading as he made his way back to the entrance. She heard the main stable doors close, heard the heavy bar drop into place. They had locked her in. Not just in the room, but in the stable itself. If something went wrong, if the beasts somehow broke free of their cages, there would be no escape. She was trapped here with them for 7 days and 7 nights. Alara stood in the doorway of her small room, looking out at the rows of cages, at the shadows that held monsters, and felt a strange calm settle over her. All her life, she had been afraid of disappointing her father, afraid of her stepmother's schemes, afraid of Vivian's casual cruelty, afraid of every moment in a world where she did not belong. But this fear was different. This fear was clean. It was not about shame or inadequacy or failing to be something she could never be. This fear was about survival, pure and simple. And somehow that made it easier to bear. She stepped back into the room, barred the door, and sat on the cot. The stone walls were cold, and the blanket was thin. But she had been cold before. She had been hungry before. She had been alone before. This was just a different flavor of the same suffering, and she had already survived 23 years of it. What was one more week? Outside her door, something howled. The sound was mournful and wild, full of a loneliness that resonated in her chest like a tuning fork struck against bone. Another beast answered, and then another, until the stable was filled with a chorus of inhuman voices singing to the approaching night. Elara lay down on the cot, pulled the blanket over herself, and closed her eyes. If she was going to die here, she would at least face it with the dignity of rest. If she was going to survive, she would need her strength. And if something impossible was about to happen, something that would change everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in this world, she would meet it ready. The first night in the stables was about to begin. Elara did not know that by morning, nothing would ever be the same again. The sounds of the beasts were worse in the dark. Without even the dim light filtering through the windows to anchor her sense of reality, Elara lay on the cot, listening to the symphony of predators. There were low rumbles that she felt in her chest more than heard, high-pitched keening that set her teeth on edge, and the constant sound of movement, claws on stone, bodies shifting against iron bars, the rustle of something large disturbing hay. She tried to sleep, but every time she started to drift, a new sound would jerk her back to wakefulness, her heart hammering with the certain knowledge that something was about to break through her door. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange here, measured not by the position of the sun, but by the gaps between one terrifying sound and the next. At some point, exhaustion began to win its battle against fear. Her eyelids grew heavy. Her breathing slowed. The sounds became background noise, still present, but no longer sharp enough to keep her conscious. She was almost asleep when she heard it. The sound of her door rattling. Not violently, not like something was trying to break it down, but gently, deliberately, as if something was testing it, learning it, understanding how it worked. Elara's eyes snapped open, but she did not move. She barely breathed. Every instinct screamed at her to stay perfectly still, to not draw attention, to become as small and insignificant as possible. The rattling stopped. Silence fell, heavier than the noise had been. She waited, counting her heartbeats, trying to hear over the rushing of blood in her ears. Then she heard breathing. Something was standing right outside her door, close enough that she could hear the deep, steady rhythm of its breath, close enough that she could hear the faint whistle of air moving through nostrils far larger than human, close enough that if the door had not been there, she could have reached out and touched. A low sound came from the creature, not quite a growl, but something deeper, more questioning. It resonated through the wood, through the stone, through her bones, and something inside Elara responded. It was not her wolf. She did not have a wolf, but something in her chest seemed to unfold, like a flower that had been closed her entire life suddenly opening to light it had never known existed. The sensation was so strange, so unexpected, that she gasped. The breathing outside her door stopped. Then, impossibly, she heard a whine, soft, almost plaintive, like the creature was asking a question it desperately needed answered. Elara sat up slowly, her body moving before her mind could catch up and tell her this was insanity. She stood. She walked to the door. She placed her hand flat against the wood, feeling the cold grain under her palm, and that thing in her chest unfurled further, reaching out toward the presence on the other side. "I do not understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. Another whine answered her, and this time she heard something else in it. Recognition. Longing. The sound of something lost that had finally found what it had been searching for. Her hand moved to the bar holding the door closed. This was foolish. This was suicide. Garrett had warned her. Her father had intended this to be her grave. Every logical thought in her head screamed at her to step back, to stay behind the barrier, to cling to the illusion of safety. The locked door provided, but that thing in her chest was pulling now, pulling like a tide, like gravity, like the inevitable movement of the moon across the sky. Her fingers closed around the bar. She lifted it. The door swung open, and she found herself face to face with a wolf the size of a bear. Its fur was the color of storm clouds, silver and gray with streaks of white that seemed to glow in the faint moonlight filtering in from somewhere high above. Its eyes were gold, bright as coins, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that should have been terrifying, but somehow was not. The wolf took a step forward. Elara did not move back. She could not explain why, could not justify the complete absence of fear, when fear should have been the only logical response. But something in her knew with absolute certainty that this creature was not going to hurt her. The wolf lowered its massive head and pressed its muzzle against her hand. The touch sent a shock through her entire body, like lightning made of warmth instead of heat, like every nerve ending she possessed suddenly singing in harmony. The thing in her chest bloomed fully open, and she understood. She could feel the wolf, not just its presence, but its emotions. Confusion, wonder, relief, a desperate need to protect. A question it had been asking its entire life finally finding an answer. Her other hand came up without her conscious decision, burying itself in the thick fur of the wolf's neck. The animal made a pow sound deep in its throat, something between a purr and a rumble, and leaned into her touch with a force that should have knocked her over but somehow did not. How is this possible? Elara breathed, and the wolf's ears perked forward at the sound of her voice as if it understood not just the tone, but the meaning. Behind the great wolf, she could see that its cage door stood open. The lock had not been broken. The door had simply been pushed, as if it had never been properly secured, or as if something had wanted this to happen. Movement in the shadows caught her attention. Other shapes emerging from other cages. Doors that should have been locked standing open like invitations. A massive black panther, its coat so dark it seemed to be made of liquid shadow, padded forward on silent paws. A wolf with fur the color of autumn leaves and eyes like emeralds. Something that looked like a bear but moved with the grace of a dancer. A white fox, the size of a small pony with 3 tails that swayed hypnotically. They approached her slowly, cautiously, but not with the wariness of predators stalking prey. With the hesitation of creatures who had found something they had been searching for but did not quite believe was real. One by one they came to her. One by one they pressed against her, nuzzled her hands, lowered their heads in a gesture that she somehow knew was submission. Not the forced submission of dominance and fear, but the willing submission of recognition. They knew her, or they knew what she was, even if she did not. The white fox made a chirping sound and wound itself around her legs. The black panther rubbed its head against her shoulder, nearly knocking her over with the force of its affection. The autumn wolf lay down at her feet, blocking any path away from her as if declaring itself her guardian. And the storm-gray wolf that had opened her door never moved from her side, its body pressed against hers like an anchor. Elara sank down to the floor, overwhelmed, her legs no longer able to hold her weight under the impossibility of what was happening. The beasts moved with her, arranging themselves around her in a protective circle, their warmth surrounding her, their breathing synchronizing with hers. She reached out, touching each one in turn, and with each touch, she felt that connection deepen. She could sense their individual personalities now. The storm wolf was noble and fierce, a leader by nature. The black panther was playful. Despite its intimidating appearance, curious about everything. The autumn wolf was steady and calm, a stabilizing presence. The bear creature was gentle despite its size, protective but not aggressive. The white fox was clever and mischievous, always thinking 3 steps ahead. These were not mindless beasts. They were individuals. They were intelligent. And they had chosen her. Or perhaps she had been meant for them all along. "I do not have a wolf," she whispered to them, tears streaming down, her face without her permission. "I am broken. I am nothing." The storm wolf made a sound that was almost a laugh, if wolves could laugh. It licked her face, swiping away her tears with a tongue the size of her hand. The autumn wolf huffed as if disagreeing with her entirely. The black panther purred so loudly the sound vibrated through her whole body. They did not care that she had no wolf of her own. They did not care that her pack had rejected her. They did not care about any of the things that had defined her entire existence up until this moment. They cared that she was here. They cared that she could feel them. They cared that when she touched them, something in them recognized something in her. Ilara leaned back against the storm wolf's side, and the great beast adjusted its position to better support her weight. The others pressed closer, creating a cocoon of fur and warmth and acceptance. For the first time in her entire life, she did not feel alone. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere, to someone, with someone. She closed her eyes, and this time when sleep came, it came easily. The beasts kept watch around her, their eyes glowing in the darkness, their bodies forming an impenetrable barrier between her and the world that had tried to break her. In the morning, when Garrett came with her food and water, he would find something that would shake the foundation of everything the kingdom thought they knew about power and bloodlines, and the way the old magic worked. But that was tomorrow's revelation. Tonight, Ilara slept peacefully for the first time in her life, surrounded by monsters who saw her as something precious, something sacred, something worth protecting at any cost. The dawn came too soon, and not soon enough. Ilara woke to the feeling of warm breath on her face and opened her eyes to find the white fox inches from her nose, its multiple tails waving gently, as if conducting a silent symphony. The other beasts were still arranged. Around her, some sleeping, others watching the stable entrance with alert attention. Morning light filtered through the high windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. She could hear birds singing outside, their cheerful voices a stark contrast to the previous night's chorus of predatory sounds. For a moment, she simply lay there, processing the impossible reality of her situation. She was alive. More than alive. She was surrounded by creatures that should have killed her, and instead they had protected her, chosen her, recognized something in her that no one else ever had. The sound of footsteps approaching sent a ripple of tension through the animals. The storm wolf lifted its head, ears forward, a low, warning rumble building in its chest. The black panther rose to a crouch, muscles coiled like springs. Even the bear creature, gentle as it had been with her, positioned itself between her and the door. "Easy," Ilara whispered, her hand on the storm wolf's shoulder. "It is just Garrett. He brings food." She did not know how she knew the beast would listen to her, but she was not surprised when they relaxed slightly at her words, still alert, but no longer on the verge of attack. The main stable door opened, and she heard Garrett's familiar heavy footsteps, heard the sound of a tray being set down outside her room. Then silence. Then footsteps approaching slowly, cautiously. "Girl?" Garrett's voice called out, rough with concern and expectation of the worst. "Are you alive in there?" "I am here," Ilara called back, and she heard his sharp intake of breath, surprised that she could answer, that she had survived the night. His footsteps came closer, and then he appeared in the doorway of her room. He stopped so abruptly he nearly fell, his good eye going wide, his scarred face draining of color. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the circle of battle beasts arranged around her like a living fortress. "Mother Moon," he breathed, and his hand went to his chest as if checking that his heart was still beating. "What in the name of the Ancient Ones are you?" Ilara looked up at him from her position on the floor, surrounded by creatures that even this scarred veteran warrior treated with wary respect. "I do not know," she admitted honestly. "But they opened their cages, they came to me, and they have not hurt me." Garrett took a step into the room, moving with the exaggerated care of someone walking through a field of sleeping dragons. The storm wolf's rumble returned. Not quite aggressive, but definitely a warning. The trainer froze. "Can you control them?" His voice was steady, but she could hear the undercurrent of fear. Control was not quite the right word. She did not command them the way an alpha commanded a pack. It was more like she could suggest, and they considered her suggestions with far more weight than they would anyone else's. "I think so. I mean, they listen to me. They respond." She paused, then added, "Their cages were not broken. How did they get out?" Garrett's gaze moved from the beasts to the open cage doors visible behind them, assessing. Those locks require 2 hands to open. No paw, no matter how clever, could manipulate them. His eye narrowed. Unless someone let them out. The implication hung in the air. Someone had deliberately released the battle beasts, knowing a defenseless girl was locked in here with them. Someone had tried to ensure that her death looked like a tragic accident. The list of people who wanted her dead was not long, but everyone on it had the power to make it happen. "That does not matter right now," Garrett said, shaking his head as if clearing away unhelpful thoughts. "What matters is that you are alive, and you have somehow bonded with the Alpha King's personal battle beasts. Do you understand what this means?" Alara shook her head. Garrett let out a long breath, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw something like awe in his expression. "There is an old bloodline, ancient, from before the packs formed, before the kingdoms rose. They were called beast speakers in some texts, dominators in others. They could command any creature touched by the old magic. They were more powerful than any alpha because they did not just have their own wolf. They had every beast that recognized them." He gestured to the animals surrounding her. "These beasts are descended from the ancient ones, touched by magic older than the werewolf. Curse or gift, depending on who you ask. They do not submit to anyone. The Alpha King himself can barely control them, and only through force of will and dominance. But you." He laughed, a sound without humor. "You are not controlling them at all, are you? They are choosing you." "I do not understand," Alara said, even though part of her was beginning to. All her life, she had thought she was broken because she did not have a wolf. But what if she did not have a wolf because she was never meant to? What if she was something else entirely, something rarer, something the modern packs had forgotten existed? "Your father is going to lose his mind," Garrett said, and now there was definitely satisfaction in his voice. "The Alpha King arrives today for the wedding. He will come to check on his beasts. He will find them bonded to you. And everything your family planned, every political alliance they carefully constructed, is about to crumble. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one." Alara felt the weight of those words settle over her. The Alpha King, Theron, the man who was supposed to marry Vivian in 6 days, cementing an alliance between their packs. What would he do when he found out that his battle beasts had chosen someone else? What would her father do? What would Vivian do? "I need to hide them," she said suddenly, struggling to stand. The beast moved with her, supporting her, helping her rise. "If no one knows, maybe I can just wait out the week and then leave like my father planned. I can go somewhere far away, and none of this has to matter." Garrett shook his head. "Girl, you are surrounded by 8 of the most distinctive creatures in the kingdom. The Stormwolf alone is legendary. The Shadow Panther has killed more enemies than most pack warriors. You cannot hide them, and even if you could." He paused, his gaze moving over the protective circle of beasts. "They will not let you." As if to prove his point, the Storm Wolf moved closer to her side, and the Autumn Wolf positioned itself directly in her path to the door. The message was clear. She was not going anywhere without them, and they were not going to hide. "Then what do I do?" Alara asked, and she hated how small her voice sounded, how uncertain. She had spent her whole life being told she was nothing, and now suddenly she was supposed to be something so rare that even the mention of it put awe in a hardened warrior's eyes. Garrett was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he said, "You survive. You hold on. And when the Alpha King comes, you look him in the eye, and you do not apologize for being what you are." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "I will not tell anyone you are alive yet. Let them wonder. Let them worry. You have 6 days until the wedding. Use them to figure out what you want, because when the truth comes out, and it will come out, you are going to have choices to make. Choices that will affect more than just yourself." He left, taking the tray of food with him. Ilara stared after him, her mind racing. 6 days. 6 days in which she would remain dead to the world, hidden in the stables with creatures that should have killed her, but instead had claimed her. 6 days before, everything exploded into chaos. The white fox nudged her hand, and she looked down to find its intelligent eyes watching her intently. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. Even though she knew it could not answer in words. But the fox tilted its head, and she felt rather than heard its response in that strange way she was beginning to understand. Survive. Grow stronger. Prepare. The beasts would teach her, it seemed. They would show her what she was capable of, help her understand the power she had never known she possessed. And when the Alpha King came looking for his beasts, he would find something he had never expected. He would find her. She just hoped she would be ready. The next 3 days passed in a strange bubble of existence that felt separate from the rest of the world. Ilara remained in the stables, and the beasts remained with her. Garrett brought food and water twice a day, and each time he came, she could see the amazement in his eyes had not faded. If anything, it had grown as he watched her interact with creatures that had nearly killed him more than once. The bond between her and the beasts deepened with every passing hour. She learned their names, or rather, she learned what to call them. The storm wolf was Tempest. The name came to her in a moment of clarity when she watched him command the other beasts with nothing more than a glance, his presence like weather itself, impossible to ignore. The Black Panther was Shadow, which seemed obvious until Ilara realized the name was not about her dark fur, but about the way she could disappear even in plain sight, moving through the world like a ghost. The Autumn Wolf was Copper, named for the metallic sheen of his red-gold coat in sunlight. The bear creature was Stone, solid and unmoving in his loyalty. And the white fox with 3 tails was Mischief, which made the creature's eyes sparkle with what could only be described as laughter when Ilara first said it out loud. There were others, too. A golden eagle the size of a man with talons that could pierce armor, who she called Dawn because its feathers caught the morning light like captured fire. A serpent with scales that shifted colors like oil on water, surprisingly gentle despite its intimidating appearance, who became Prism. And a wolf even larger than Tempest, with fur so black it seemed to absorb light, scarred and fierce, but with eyes that held ancient wisdom. That one she called Nightshade, and he regarded her with an intensity that suggested he was measuring her worth with every interaction. Through Garrett, whispered in hurried conversations when he brought her meals, she learned what was happening in the palace above. The Alpha King had arrived to great fanfare. The celebrations had begun. Her family had told everyone that Ilara had been sent away to an aunt in a distant pack, a convenient lie that explained her absence without raising too many questions. Vivian was radiant in her role as future queen, charming everyone who met her, perfect in every way. And Alpha King Theron was everything the rumors said he was. Powerful, ruthless, devastatingly handsome, completely devoted to duty. He had not asked about the beasts yet, apparently trusting his trainers to care for them during the festivities. But it was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, In her hidden sanctuary, Alara was changing. The connection with the beasts was not passive. It was transformative. When she touched Tempest, she could feel the storm inside him, the raw power of wind and lightning that his ancient ancestors had commanded. When Shadow brushed against her, she learned the value of patience, of watching, of moving unseen until the perfect moment to strike. Copper taught her steadiness. Stone taught her resilience. Mischief taught her that even in the darkest situations, cleverness could find a path that strength alone would miss. Dawn showed her the world from above, through a connection that let her see through his eyes when he flew, teaching her to think in 3 dimensions rather than 2. Prism demonstrated that flexibility was its own kind of strength, that adapting to circumstances was as valuable as resisting them. And Nightshade, oldest and most scarred of all the beasts, taught her the hardest lesson, that surviving was not enough, that bearing wounds and carrying on was not the same as healing, that she would have to confront what had been done to her, not just endure it, if she wanted to become whole. On the 4th night, she dreamed. In the dream, she stood in a forest that no longer existed, trees older than kingdoms stretching toward a sky unmarked by human presence. Around her, creatures gathered, not just wolves, but bears and great cats and birds of prey and serpents and things that had no names in modern language. And standing among them was a woman with silver hair and eyes that held the green of deep forests. The woman smiled at her. "You have been asleep for so long, but now you are waking up. Now you are becoming what you were always meant to be." Alara tried to speak, but the woman held up a hand. "The beasts chose you because they remember. Their blood remembers even if the world has forgotten. You are not wolfless, child. You are something far older. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you hide? Will you run? Or will you claim your birthright?" "What birthright?" Alara managed to ask. "The right to be yourself without apology. The right to stand among those who tried to break you and show them they failed. The right to choose your own destiny instead of accepting the one they tried to force upon you." The woman began to fade, the forest dissolving around her. "He is coming tomorrow. The king. Make your choice before he arrives. Submit to fate, or become fate itself." Alara woke with tears on her face, and Tempest's massive head resting on her stomach, his golden eyes watching her with concern. "I do not know how to become fate," she whispered to him. The wolf huffed, a sound that somehow conveyed both sympathy and certainty. She did not have to know how. She just had to decide she was going to try. The rest would follow. She spent the 5th day preparing, though she was not entirely sure what she was preparing for. She bathed in the water trough, using the harsh soap meant for the beasts, because it was all she had, trying to wash away 4 days of stable dust and fierce sweat. She braided her hair, a simple plait down her back that at least looked intentional rather than neglected. Her clothes were still the worn servant's dress she had been wearing when they locked her in here, but Garrett had smuggled her a shawl, something warmer as the nights grew cold. It was not much, but it was what she had. The beasts seemed to sense her tension. They stayed close, even the ones who normally roamed the stable freely. Mischief kept doing tricks, as if trying to make her laugh. Dawn perched on a high beam and sang, his eagle cry echoing through the space like an anthem. Stone positioned himself at the door, immovable as his name suggested. By the time evening fell, Alara's nerves were stretched so tight she felt like she might shatter at the slightest touch. Garrett had said the king would come tomorrow to check on the beasts before the final wedding preparations began. Tomorrow, everything would change. She just wished she knew what direction that change would take. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. She was sitting against Tempest's side, Copper's head in her lap, and Shadow purring next to her, when she heard voices outside the stable. Not Garrett's familiar heavy footsteps, but multiple sets of feet, moving with the coordinated precision of warriors. And then a voice, deep and resonant with the kind of authority that made alpha wolves sound like puppies. I want to see them before the ceremony. Make sure they are settled. The last thing we need is one of them breaking loose during the wedding hunt tomorrow. Alpha King Theron. He was here early. He was here now. Alara's heart began to pound so hard she was sure. Everyone in the palace could hear it. Tempest lifted his head, ears forward, body tense. The other beasts moved, arranging themselves in formation around her without being asked, creating layers of defense between her and whatever was coming. She heard the main door open, heard footsteps enter the stable, heard someone say, "Your Majesty, perhaps we should wait until morning when the light is better." And then she heard him stop, heard the precise moment when Alpha King Theron realized something was very, very wrong. "Where are my beasts?" His voice was still controlled, but there was an edge to it now, a hint of the predator that lurked beneath the civilized surface. "The cages are empty, every single one. Your Majesty, I can explain." That was Garrett, his voice carefully neutral. "The situation is unusual, but no one has been harmed. Where are my beasts?" Each word was distinct, separate, heavy with the weight of command that could compel any wolf to submit. But Alara was not a wolf, and neither were the creatures surrounding her. She stood up, her decision crystallizing in that moment. She could hide, cower in her small room, let them find her like a trapped animal. Or she could walk out and meet fate on her feet, surrounded by the only beings who had ever seen value in her. She chose to walk. The beasts moved with her, flowing around her like water, like Shadow's namesake. They emerged from the back of the stable into the main area, and she saw him for the first time. Alpha King Theron was everything the whispers claimed and more. Tall enough that most men had to look up to meet his eyes, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a kingdom. His hair was black as midnight, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite for all the emotion it currently showed. But his eyes were the blue of deep ice, and when they locked onto her, Alara felt the impact like a physical blow. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Theron stared at her, surrounded by his legendary battle beasts, all of them clearly choosing her protection over his command. Behind him, she could see guards with their hands on weapons, uncertain what to do. Garrett stood to the side, his expression caught between vindication and concern. And then Tempest did something extraordinary. The great storm wolf walked forward, positioning himself between Alara and the king. Not aggressively, but firmly, claiming her, declaring allegiance. The message was unmistakable. Theron's eyes widened fractionally, the first real crack in his controlled expression. "Impossible," he breathed. "Tempest has never submitted to anyone. I barely earned his tolerance through years of proving myself in battle." "He has not submitted," Garrett said quietly. "None of them have. They have chosen. There is a difference." Theron's gaze snapped to the trainer. "Explain, now." Garrett gestured to Alara. "This is Alara, eldest daughter of Alpha Marcus of Silvercrest. She has been housed in the stables for the past 5 days by order of her father. The beasts found her, and they recognized what she is." "What she is?" Theron repeated, his voice dangerous now. "She is a human girl with no scent of wolf about her. What could she possibly be that would make ancient battle beasts bow to her?" "She is a beast dominator," Garrett said, and the words fell into the stable like stones into still water, ripples of shock spreading outward. "A bloodline that has not appeared in 3 centuries. She can command any creature touched by the old magic. Your beasts did not bow to her, Your Majesty. They claimed her as one of their own." Theron's face had gone very still, and Alara recognized the look. It was the same expression her father wore when he was thinking several moves ahead, calculating outcomes, measuring consequences. "Eldest daughter of Marcus," he said slowly, his eyes moving over her with new intensity. "The one who was supposedly sent to a distant relative because she had no wolf. The one no one speaks of. The one who was hidden from my view." Understanding crashed over Alara like a wave. Her father had not just hidden her to avoid embarrassment. He had hidden her because even he had not known what she was. But some instinct had told him to keep her away from anyone powerful enough to recognize her value. If Theron had met her, if the beasts had found her before the wedding was arranged, everything would have been different. "You were meant to be invisible," Theron continued, taking a step closer. Tempest growled, and the king froze. "You were meant to disappear. But instead, you became something they could not ignore. Tell me, Alara of Silvercrest, did you know what you were when they locked you in here? Or did you discover it only when the beasts came to you?" His voice was not cruel, but it was not kind either. It was the voice of someone trying to solve a puzzle that had suddenly become much more complicated. "I did not know," Alara said, and her voice came out stronger than she expected, steadier. "I thought I was broken. I thought I was nothing. They told me that my whole life. But the beasts." She paused, putting her hand on Tempest's head, feeling the connection pulse between them. "The beasts told me something different. They told me I was exactly what I was supposed to be. I just had to wake up." Theron stared at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Not softness, exactly, but recognition. The look of someone who understood what it meant to be defined by power you did not ask for, to be shaped by expectations you never agreed to meet. "I am supposed to marry your sister in 2 days," he said finally. "A political alliance carefully negotiated over months. An agreement that brings our packs together and strengthens the kingdom's northern border. Your father assured me his bloodline was strong, his daughter perfect." He smiled, and it was not a pleasanting expression. He failed to mention he had 2 daughters, and he very carefully failed to mention that one of them was far more valuable than the other. Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach. Value. She had gone from worthless to valuable in the span of moments. But the way Theron said it made it clear she was still being measured in terms of utility, still being assessed for what she could offer, rather than who she was. "I am not a bargaining chip," she said quietly. "I am not here to replace my sister in your political calculations. I am just trying to survive." "Survival," Theron repeated. And now his smile turned genuine, though no less dangerous. "You have bonded with 8 of the deadliest creatures in the kingdom. You command the loyalty of beasts that have killed men for breathing wrong in their presence. You are the first beast dominator to appear in 3 centuries, which makes you more politically valuable than any 10 alphas combined. Trust me, you have done far more than survive." He looked at Garrett. "Who else knows?" "Just us, Your Majesty. The girl has been presumed dead by most, and those who know she was put here expected her to be dead by morning." Theron nodded slowly, thinking. Then he looked back at Alara. "You have a choice to make. You can walk out of here with me right now. I will present you to your father and the court. I will explain what you are and what that means. The political implications alone will cause chaos. Your father will try to reclaim you, to use your newfound value to renegotiate everything. Vivian's position will be threatened. The wedding will be called into question." He paused. "Or you can stay here, hidden. Wait until after the ceremony. Give your sister her moment. Then leave quietly. Take the beasts who have chosen you, and go somewhere far away where no one will try to use you as a piece on a political board. I will arrange safe passage. Resources. Everything you need to disappear." It was a nigh impossible choice. One path led to acknowledgement. to forcing her family to confront what they had tried to discard. But it also led to being absorbed into another political game, traded from her father's neglect to a king's strategy. The other path led to freedom, but it meant leaving without ever making them see what they had done, without ever getting the vindication she had dreamed of in her darkest moments. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Alara looked at the beasts surrounding her, at Tempest, noble and fierce, at Shadow, patient and deadly, at Copper, steady and true, at all of them who had seen her worth when no one else could. "You said I have a choice," she said slowly. "But you have framed both options as if I am still being moved around by others. Either I am your political revelation or your secret charity case. Either way, I am still being told where to go and what to be." Theron's eyes narrowed. "Then, what would you choose if you could choose anything?" "I want a third option." Her voice was gaining strength now, fueled by something she had never felt before. Not anger exactly, not rebellion, but certainty. "I want to stay here until the wedding. Let Vivian have her ceremony. Let my father think his plan worked. But after..." She lifted her chin, meeting the Alpha King's ice-blue eyes directly. "After, I want to be acknowledged. Not as your subject or your tool or your secret. I want my family to know I survived. I want them to see what I became. And then I want to decide for myself where I go and what I do next. No arrangements made for me. No safe passage orchestrated by someone else. Just me and the beasts who chose me, making our own path." Theron studied her for a long moment, and she could see him reassessing, recalculating. Finally, he laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and something that might have been respect. "You have been awake to your power for less than a week, and you are already making demands of a king. Bold. Foolish, perhaps, but bold." He glanced at Tempest, who was still standing guard between them. "Your beast has good taste. Very well. Third option it is. You stay here. I will ensure you are fed properly, not the scraps Garrett has been smuggling. After the wedding ceremony, before the celebration feast, I will announce the discovery of a beast dominator. I will bring you before the court. What happens after that?" He shrugged. "That will be up to you. I will offer you a place in my kingdom if you want it, but I will not compel it. Is that acceptable?" It was more than she had hoped for, and yet felt like it might not be enough. But it was a start. It was acknowledgement that she had agency, that her choices mattered, that she was not just another piece to be moved around a board she had not consented to play on. "Acceptable," she agreed. Theron turned to leave, then paused. "One question. The mate bond. Do you feel it?" The question caught her completely off guard. "What?" "The mate bond," he repeated patiently. "All the legends say that beast dominators are true mates to alpha kings, that the power recognizes power, that the old magic pairs them. My wolf has been restless since I arrived at this palace, and I had assumed it was pre-wedding nerves or discomfort with the political nature of the union. But the moment I saw you..." He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. "My wolf recognized something, so I am asking, do you feel it?" Alara wanted to say no, wanted to deny it. But the truth was, the moment she had seen Theron, something in her chest had pulled toward him with the same inexorable force that had drawn her to the beasts. She had been so overwhelmed by everything else that she had not identified it, but now that he named it, she could not unfeel it. "I do not want a mate," she said, instead of answering directly. "I do not want to be paired off to someone because magic says we should be together. I have spent my entire life being told who I am and what I am worth. I am not ready to hand that over to a bond I did not choose." Theron's expression softened fractionally. "I am not asking you to. I am marrying your sister in 2 days, because duty demands it, mate bond or not. I am a king before I am a wolf. But I needed to know if what I felt was real, or if I was imagining complications where none existed. He met her eyes directly. After the wedding, after the revelation, if you choose to explore what this pull between us means, I will be open to that conversation. If you choose to walk away and never see me again, I will respect that too. The bond might exist, but what we do about it is still our choice. He left then, his guards following, leaving Alara alone with Garrett and the beasts. The trainer let out a long breath. Well, that could have gone worse. Could it? Alara asked, her legs suddenly shaky now that the adrenaline was fading. He just confirmed I am. Probably the mate of a man who is marrying my sister in 2 days. How does that count as not worse? Garrett shrugged. You are alive. You have a plan. And you have the most powerful creatures in the kingdom ready to defend you. In my experience, that is about as good as it gets when fate decides to make your life interesting. Ilara sank down to the floor, and the beasts immediately surrounded her again, offering comfort in their presence. Mischief curled up in her lap, and Shadow draped herself across Ilara's legs. Tempest settled beside her with a heavy sigh, as if he too found the politics of humans exhausting. 2 more days, she whispered. 2 more days, and then everything changes. Again. Copper nuzzled her hand, his way of saying she was not alone in facing whatever came next. And she was not. She had 8 legendary beasts who had chosen her. She had a king who had offered her respect, if not understanding. She had survived her family's attempt to erase her. 2 more. Days felt both impossibly long and frighteningly short, but she would face them the same way she had faced the past 5 days. 1 moment at a time. 1 choice at a time. 1 step closer to becoming whoever she was meant to be. In the palace above, wedding preparations continued. Musicians practiced. Servants hung decorations. Vivian tried on her wedding gown for the 10th time, making sure every detail was perfect. And no one except a scarred trainer and a conflicted king knew that the forgotten daughter was about to upend everything they thought they knew about power, about worth, about the old magic that still flowed through certain bloodlines, whether the modern world acknowledged it or not. The morning of the wedding came wrapped in golden sunlight and the scent of flowers. Ilara could hear music drifting down from the palace, could imagine the bustle of final preparations, the excitement of guests arriving for the ceremony that would unite 2 powerful packs. She sat in the stables, wearing the same worn dress she had been locked in here with, her hair braided simply. But she was not the same girl who had entered this place a week ago. That girl had believed she was nothing. This woman knew differently. Garrett had brought her a proper breakfast. Not scraps, but eggs and fresh bread and fruit, courtesy of the king's orders. It starts in 2 hours, he said, setting the tray down. The ceremony is at noon. Theron said he will come for you immediately after, before anyone has time to disperse to the celebration feast. Are you ready? Was she ready? To face her father, who had sentenced her to death by beast? To face her stepmother, who had smiled while suggesting it? To face Vivian, perfect Vivian, who had never once looked at her with anything resembling sisterly affection? To stand before a court of werewolves who would see her as either a threat or an opportunity, but never just as a person? No, she admitted. But I am going anyway. Garrett smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face into something almost gentle. That is how you know you are doing the right thing. If it felt easy, it would not be worth doing. He left her to her breakfast, and Ilara ate slowly, feeding bits to the beasts who crowded around her. They seemed to sense that today was significant, their energy restless but focused. Tempest kept walking to the door and back, as if scouting for threats. Shadow paced with liquid grace. Even Stone, usually so calm, seemed agitated. We are going to be fine, Ilara told them, trying to convince herself as much as the animals. We survived being locked in here. We can survive being revealed. Mischief chirped at her, his three tails waving in a pattern that she had learned meant skepticism. "All right," she conceded. Surviving the beasts might have been easier than surviving what comes next. But at least this time, I am not alone. She had never been alone, she realized. Even before the beast had claimed her, she had survived 23 years of neglect and cruelty. She had endured. She had kept going even when every day brought fresh evidence that she did not belong, that she was not wanted, that she was a mistake her family wished they could erase. That had its own kind of strength, even if no one had acknowledged it at the time. The music from above swelled, reaching a crescendo. The ceremony was beginning. Alara closed her eyes and tried not to imagine it. Vivian, in a gown that probably cost more than most people earned in a year, walking down an aisle lined with flowers. Her father, proud and beaming, giving away his perfect daughter. Theron, tall and powerful in ceremonial armor, accepting a mate he had chosen for political advantage rather than love. The words that would bind them. The promises that would seal the alliance. It should not matter to her. Vivian had never been cruel the way their stepmother was cruel. She had simply been indifferent, and indifference, from someone who should have been an ally, had its own special kind of pain. But Alara found she did not wish her sister ill. She just wished things could have been different, wished their father had been capable of seeing value in both his daughters instead of only one, wished there had been space in their family for two kinds of strength instead of only the kind that came with claws and fangs. The music changed, becoming something slower, more ceremonial. The vows were being spoken. Alara wondered if Theron was thinking about the mate bond as he promised himself to another woman. Wondered if his wolf was fighting him. The way legend said happened when an alpha was paired with someone other than their true mate. But Theron was a king before he was a wolf. He had said so himself. He would do his duty, mate bond or not. The music reached its final crescendo, then fell silent. It was done. Vivian was queen. Her family had achieved everything they had schemed for. And now, it was Alara's turn to shatter their perfect moment. She stood up, and the beasts rose with her, forming their protective configuration without being asked. She walked to the front of the stables and waited. Minutes passed. 10. 20. The wait felt longer than the entire week had felt, every second stretching like honey poured in winter. And then she heard footsteps. Multiple sets. Purposeful. Coming closer. The stable doors opened, and Theron walked in, no longer in his ceremonial armor, but in simpler clothes, though he still wore the crown. His face was unreadable, but his eyes found hers immediately, and she saw the tension in him, the coiled readiness of a predator about to spring. "It is time," he said simply. Behind him she could see guards, but also others. Court officials, the master of ceremonies, witnesses to whatever was about to happen. "I have told them we discovered something remarkable in the stables during the week, something that changes the political landscape. They are expecting a new weapon, perhaps, or an alliance with a foreign power." His smile was sharp. "They are not expecting you." "How do you want to do this?" Alara asked, her voice steady, despite the terror and anticipation warring in her chest. "Walk beside me," Theron said, and extended his hand. "Not behind me like a servant, not hidden like a secret, but beside me like an equal. Let them see you. Let the beasts show them what you are. And then we will let the chaos unfold." Alara looked at his hand for a long moment. This was it. The moment everything changed. The moment she stopped being invisible and became impossible to ignore. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and she felt the mate bond pulse between them like a living thing, recognized but not yet claimed. Tempest moved to her other side, and the rest of the beasts fell into formation around them, a processional of power that would be impossible to miss or misinterpret. Together, they walked out of the stables. The sunlight hit her face, the first she had felt in a week, and Alara had to stop herself from gasping at the intensity of it. She had forgotten how bright the world could be when you were not living in shadows. They crossed the courtyard, and she could see people stopping to stare, servants dropping trays, guards reaching for weapons before recognizing their king and freezing in confusion. Word spread ahead of them like wildfire, whispers racing through the palace faster than they could walk. By the time they reached the great hall where the wedding feast was being prepared, a crowd had gathered. Alara saw her father in the crowd, his face going from confusion to recognition to absolute horror in the space of a heartbeat. Saw her stepmother's mouth fall open in shock. Saw Vivian, resplendent in her wedding gown with a queen's crown on her head, go pale as death. Theron led her to the center of the hall, and the beasts arranged themselves in a circle, making sure everyone could see, making sure there was no mistaking what was happening. The king released her hand and stepped slightly to the side, not abandoning her, but making clear she was not his appendage. She stood on her own. "Lords and ladies of the court," Theron's voice rang out, pitched to carry to every corner of the hall. "On this day of celebration, the old magic has seen fit to grant us something that has not been seen in 3 centuries. A beast dominator has awakened." The gasps and exclamations rippled through the crowd like stones thrown into a pond. "Impossible!" someone shouted. "A myth," another voice added. But the beasts were real. The creatures that everyone knew, that everyone had heard stories about, all focused on one small figure in a worn servant's dress. That was not a myth. That was undeniable. "I present to you Alara of Silvercrest," Theron continued, and now his voice held an edge of steel. "Eldest daughter of Alpha Marcus, who was hidden from this court, who was locked in the beast stables to die by her own family, and who instead bonded with creatures that even I can barely control. The old bloodline has returned, and it has chosen her." Alpha Marcus stepped forward, and Alara saw the calculation in his eyes, saw him trying to figure out how to turn this to his advantage. "Your Majesty, if my daughter has this gift, then she should be trained, guided. As her father and Alpha, it is my duty to help her understand what she has become." Theron's expression could have frozen fire. "You sentenced your daughter to death and called it protection. You locked her with battle beasts and expected her to be torn apart. You have no claim to her, no right to guide her, no authority over what she chooses next." He looked at the assembled court. "The law is clear. A beast dominator is beholden to no alpha, subject to no pack hierarchy. She is a force unto herself, same as the ancient ones who came before. She answers only to her own conscience and the creatures who have claimed her." Vivian found her voice, and it was sharp with something that might have been fear or might have been anger. "So what, brother husband? You intend to set aside our marriage for her? Invoke some ancient right to claim your true mate?" The words hung in the air, and Alara saw Theron's jaw tighten. "I intend," he said carefully, "to honor the vows I just made. You are my queen, and that will not change. But the mate bond is not something that can be denied or dismissed. It exists whether I act on it or not. What I do about it, what Alara chooses to do about it, will be determined in time. Not today, not here, not as entertainment for the court." He turned to Alara. "You wanted acknowledgement. You have it. Every person in this hall now knows what you are, knows you survived what they meant to kill you. What comes next is your choice." This was it. The moment Garrett had warned her about. The moment where she had to decide not just how to survive, but how to live. Alara looked at her father, and for the first time in her life, she saw fear in his eyes. Not of her, exactly, but of what she represented. Proof that he had been wrong. Evidence that his judgment had failed. A daughter who would no longer accept being erased. "I choose freedom," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "I choose to leave this pack, leave this court, and make my own path. The beasts and I will go somewhere we are not defined by old grievances or political calculations. Somewhere we can simply exist without being weapons or bargaining chips or symbols." She paused, then looked directly at her father. "You wanted me to disappear. Congratulations. I am granting your wish. But I am disappearing on my terms, not yours. And you will live the rest of your life knowing that you threw away something precious because you were too blind to see its value." Alpha Marcus's face flushed red, and she could see his wolf rising in his eyes. The Alpha. Command building. But before he could speak, Tempest growled, low and menacing. Shadow's eyes began to glow. Stone took a step forward, and even though he had not made a sound, the threat was unmistakable. Her father's wolf retreated. She was untouchable now, protected by creatures who outmatched even an alpha. "As for you, sister," Alara said, turning to Vivian. The new queen looked smaller somehow, despite her finery and crown. "I do not blame you for our father's sins. You were raised to be perfect. And you were. But perfection is not the same as goodness, and beauty is not the same as worth. I hope you find happiness in your new life. I hope you become a queen who sees value in all her subjects, not just the strong ones." Vivian's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and for the first time in Alara's memory, her sister looked at her, really looked at her. "I should have been kinder," Vivian said quietly. "I should have seen. I am sorry. It was not enough to undo 23 years of indifference. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was more than Alara had ever expected to receive. "I accept your apology," Alara said. "Use it to be better." She turned to Theron, and the mate bond pulled tight between them, so strong now that she could barely breathe through it. "Thank you for giving me a choice, for seeing me as a person before seeing me as a tool." "Will you truly leave?" he asked, and there was something raw in his voice that the court probably could not hear, but she could feel through the bond. "Will you walk away from everything, including this pull between us?" "I will leave," she confirmed. "I need to discover who I am without someone telling me. I need to learn to trust my own judgment. I need to be free." She paused, then added quietly, "But I am not saying forever. I am saying not yet. If the bond is real, it will still be there when I am ready to explore it. If you are truly my mate, you will wait." Theron's smile was sad, but genuine. "I will wait. Take your time. Become whoever you are meant to be. And if you decide you want this, want us, my door will be open." If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? Alara looked around the hall one last time, at the court that had never seen her, the family that had never valued her, the world that had tried to break her. Then she turned and walked toward the door, the beasts moving, with her in perfect synchronization. Behind her she heard chaos beginning to erupt, voices raised in questions, demands, protests. Her father shouting something about pack law. Her stepmother's shrill voice trying to manage the scandal. Vivian's quiet crying that she had probably not meant for anyone to hear. And Theron's commanding tone cutting through it all, telling them that Alara's decision was final. Her rights absolute under the old laws. Her freedom non-negotiable. But Alara did not look back. She walked out of the palace into the sunlight, and the beasts walked with her. They crossed the courtyard, passed through the gates, and kept walking. Behind them, the palace grew smaller. Ahead of them, the world opened up, vast and full of possibilities. "Where are we going?" she asked Tempest, half expecting an answer even though she knew wolves could not speak. But the great beast simply looked at her with those golden eyes, and she felt the response in her heart rather than hearing it in her ears. Wherever you want, wherever you need, wherever you become yourself. So they walked, away from Silvercrest, away from pain and rejection, away from being defined by what she lacked instead of what she possessed. Tempest on her left, Shadow on her right, Copper and Stone flanking them, Mischief dancing ahead, scouting, Dawn soaring above, eyes sharp for danger, Prism and Nightshade bringing up the rear, making sure nothing followed that was not welcome. 8 legendary. Beasts and one woman who was finally learning she had been legendary all along. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and Alara felt lighter with every step, as if she was shedding weight she had carried so long she had forgotten it was there. The weight of unworthiness, the weight of shame, the weight of trying to be something she was never meant to be. She was free, not because someone had granted her freedom, but because she had claimed it. Not because she had proven her worth to anyone else, but because she had finally recognized her own value. The road stretched ahead of them, empty and inviting. Behind them, the palace bells began to ring, signaling the start of the wedding feast, celebrating a union, honoring a new queen, marking a new chapter for the kingdom. But Alara was writing her own chapter now, and it was just beginning. Weeks later, in a forest far from Silvercrest, Alara would build a shelter among the ancient trees. She would learn to hunt with her beasts, to trust her instincts, to listen to the old magic thrumming through her veins. She would discover that being a beast dominator was not just about commanding creatures, but about understanding them, honoring them, existing in partnership rather than dominance. She would hear stories of the new queen and her king, of how they were ruling well despite the complicated beginning of their reign. She would hear that her father had lost significant political standing after the truth of what he had done to his eldest daughter became widely known. She would hear that some packs were searching for her, wanting to ally with someone who commanded the old magic. And she would smile and move deeper into the wilderness, staying just ahead of those who would try to use her. But she would also hear, through whispers and rumors carried by travelers, that the Alpha King had never taken another mate, that he was holding to his promise, that he was waiting. And some nights, when the mate bond pulled particularly strong, when Tempest would nudge her and Mischief would chirp knowingly, she would look toward where she knew the palace stood and wonder if waiting was the same as choosing, if freedom was the same as loneliness, if becoming herself meant being alone forever, or if it meant being strong enough to eventually choose partnership from a place of wholeness rather than need. But those were questions for another day. For now, she was learning, growing, becoming, the woman who had been locked in the stables too. Dai had emerged as something the world had not seen in centuries, and she was going to make sure that when she was finally ready to rejoin that world, she would do so as herself. Completely, unapologetically, powerfully herself. The beasts curled around her as she lay beneath the stars that night, their warmth surrounding her, their breathing steady and sure. And for the first time in her entire life, Alara slept without fear, without shame, without the certainty that she did not belong. She slept as someone who had been tried by fire and beast and cruelty, and had emerged not broken, but transformed. Not diminished, but elevated. Not nothing, but everything she had always been meant to be. The ancient bloodline had awakened, and the world would never be the same.